It is playoff day, game number 1 of the Pelicans series. What are the keys to the game?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and Inside the Thunder beat writer, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Joining me is Michael Martin at Michael on Sports. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube and anywhere else you get your podcast from. Michael, it's finally here. Playoffs, game number 1 in the Paycom Center. We're just a few moments away from heading down to the arena. How are you feeling on this fine Sunday?
I'm super excited. I'm ready for this game. I wish it was earlier. I wish that we didn't have to wait for literally the last game 1 of the entire weekend, but it's been worth the wait. We've been through some trials and tribulations watching this team over the last few years, Rylan, and it's all paying off right now.
Yeah, this has been a quite the ride. Podcasting every day about a 22-win team certainly feels different than podcasting every day about a 57-win team, but we've made it through to see this team embark on their first playoff journey. Game number 1 can oftentimes set the tone. It will certainly create overreactions, both good and bad. What's the biggest key for the Thunder to make a statement in game number 1?
I don't know if it's the biggest key, but it's one that really stands out to me because Chet has really just been dynamic against this Pelicans team and sort of matchup problem. Chet staying out of foul trouble, which he's done a good job of this year, but in the playoffs, whenever things get a little bit more tricky and you've got some heady guys like Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum, it's in the back of my mind because, like I mentioned, he plays Valanciunas off the floor. You don't have to worry about Zion. So if Chet's on the floor for his normal rotation out of foul trouble, I think that it's really going to go the Thunder's way, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I think that Chet, the biggest thing to me is not giving away fouls. Like I know that you want to do the slip screens and the ghost screens and everything, but you cannot get hit with a illegal screen or anything on the offensive end. You can't even really fight for an offensive rebound too hard and get called for a loose ball foul. Those fouls you just cannot afford because as a rim protector, as a guy who's going to challenge shots, you're going to automatically fall into a couple of fouls a game. That can really compound the problem. And so whenever you take away Chet, you obviously take away a lot on both ends. So him maintaining his composure and maintaining just his good standing so far this year. He's fouled out in 1 game. He's gotten in foul trouble like 2 or 3 times only this whole season. Keeping that alive will be a big key. I also think that a big key will just come down to Josh Giddey and Jonas Valanciunas because we know that Valanciunas cannot defend Chet. We know that he just is going to be play off the floor in that capacity as long as Josh Giddey is continuing his hot streak twofold. One, just his overall great play since March 1, but also he's just played fantastic against these Pelicans. So I think that matchup can really determine how easy this win could be for Oklahoma City.
Yeah, I think they're going to shuffle guys in and out of that 5th spot, whether it be Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, Cason Wallace. But if Josh is able to keep it rolling from 3, where they don't have to really change anything, where they can play him a lot of minutes, he gives an extra dynamic playmaking, I guess, juice that they just don't have with those other guys. So I'm with you. If Josh is shooting well, I think that's a huge factor.
And I think that with the Thunder, like we have the Chet Holmgren, no foul trouble. You could talk about Valanciunas and Josh Giddey, but I think that the second key to the game here, aside from that Josh Giddey storyline, would be being crisp in your rotation in the sense of if you're going to continue to play that style, which they're going to, of collapsing in the paint hard and then relying on athleticism to sprint out and contest threes, the way that underdogs get upsets is by playing defense, which this Pelicans team can do, and knocking down threes and having some shot variance with their role players. You have to get out on guys like Trey Murphy, who, if you don't guard him, we've seen him go for 10 threes in a game. He has 11 games of 5+ 3-pointers. You have to spray out and be on top of things when you're going out to the 3-point line after collapsing in the paint. I think that'll be a massive deal for the Thunder because if you can extinguish their role players, even if BI goes off, I don't think they have enough to beat Oklahoma City.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's one of my keys as well, is the 3-point just variance with them. And I think with the Pelicans being undermanned, you're going to really see them lean into shooting a bunch of threes as a way to sort of supplement all the injuries that they have. And then I listened to the broadcast the other day when they played the Kings, and the Pelicans are like a top 3, maybe even the #1 team in corner threes. So the Thunder are definitely going to have to be just aware of a lot of those things. And but I'm excited to see what happens. But yeah, we've seen, not just in Thunder past, but just the history of the league, where a couple role players can really swing a series whenever they get hot from 3 at the right time.
Yeah, we can certainly see that every year in the playoffs. And when you look at this Pelicans team, I think that the reason that I'm not overly concerned about it, and I think that whenever you look at this through an objective lens, not through a lens of PTSD from Thunder past, or through a lens of like watching what they did Friday and getting nervous, even if BI goes off, they don't have enough around him. Even if they just want to dump it off to Valanciunas, and like you think that this is the series where he stays on the floor, this is the game where he has a big night. The Thunder should love if Valanciunas has a big night and they just dump it into him. It's like we said with Jake Madison on the Crossover podcast yesterday. That's like bunting in baseball. Like, go ahead and bunt the ball down the line every single time. Throw you out at first base. Thank you very much. On the way to 3 outs and the inning's over. I just do not think that that's a formula for success. Then you shift into Larry Nance, who, yes, a better small option, but still not a better small enough option to keep up with the Thunder small ball option, and you lose depth in your front court as well. So I think it'll come down to how well Nance and Najee Marshall play, but I just am not as intimidated by this Pelicans team as many people seem to be. I think that that's just part of being a fan, though, part of having that kind of PTSD from previous eras.
Yeah, if they go with Larry Nance, like, he's not a post-up guy either who can really punish you. Like, we saw this last year, and they haven't really done it much this year, but they could go with, like, Dub at the 5 in some of those lineups to really punish him for playing small. And then as far as Valanciunas is concerned, I really like your analogy of bunting there, because Valanciunas could have 40 and 20 tonight. But if you're trading 2s for 3s, the Thunder's offense is going to be a lot quicker, a lot more efficient. They're going to get better shots. So that's one of those things where you just say, knock yourself out. It's sort of like a football team dinking and dunking their way down the field. And it's like, you don't have enough time to really keep up with this. So I think that's something the Thunder would absolutely live with. It might jump out of like, oh, Chet had 40 points scored on or whatever. But like, at the end of the day, it's just a matter of getting that one win.
We have a few more keys to the game and some predictions. Who will win tonight? Who will be the X factor? Who will have a big night? All coming up. But first, let's say right now, but our good friends over at Prize Picks, they can make betting, they can make just having fun on sports and playing fantasy sports so much fun, so easy to do, and make these games more enjoyable. Check it out today. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you go there with over 3 million members, and you just project. They have more or less than their Prize Pick projections. And it's fun to do in the playoffs as you're sitting here watching every single game from noon to midnight. You're watching NBA basketball. Might as well have some fun. You have a chance to win 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks at Prize Picks. That's turning $10 into $1,000 on the NBA playoffs, on the NHL playoffs, and baseball's in full swing too. You just go there, you pick 2 to 6 players, and you just see, will they have more or less than their Prize Pick projections. Make sure that you go there for all the big moments that happen in April and have some fun with their great ways to play and their great gameplay as well. Check it out today at Prize Picks. Go download the app. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's Prize Picks. Promo code LOCKEDONNBA for the first deposit match up to $100. All right, we're back. Previewing the game. Game number 1, keys to the game. Michael Martin joins me to do this and talk about our last predictions before the series tips off. Michael, we've had to cram a lot of preview content into a couple of days here without knowing the opponent until Friday. But with game number 1, what is the final key to the game? If the Thunder are able to do this, they'll for sure win.
When just tonight or the whole series?
Tonight, game number 1.
Okay. If they are able to really control the pace, I think the Pelicans, like we mentioned, with their sort of talent disparity with all their injuries, they're probably more beneficial to really play slow. But if the Thunder can get them out and running and get a lot of these like drive and kicks for 3s, I think that plays right to their hands.
Yeah, and that's going to be the interesting part of it, is because We talked about Jake Madison of how the Pelicans also like to play fast. They also like to use athleticism and their length. However, if you get into a war of athleticism and a war of transition and pace with the Thunder, you're going to lose that war. Like, you're going to have to dictate a different pace. So that is a problem for the Pelicans in both ways. Number one, that's not how they typically play, is to slow things down. So now you're having to play a style that you've hardly played before in the biggest moment, in the biggest game. And number two, if you do want to play fast as you relied on this season, that plays into the hands of Oklahoma City, and they're just going to be better than you at playing fast. I'm curious about the pace in terms of the postseason, where it's more of a half-court game naturally. The Thunder, excellent half-court team, by the way. I think that most people from the outside looking in just view this team as, since they're good in transition, they're not good in half-court. They are excellent in half-court and also really good in transition. I would lean Thunder if this game slows down, just based on the two half-court offenses, especially without Zion Williamson. But I'm curious to see if the Thunder can continue to get deflections, get steals, and get transition points the other way. The reason I believe that, they'll still have success defensively, even though it's predicated on turning you over, is that this team is so long that even if it doesn't result in just pure steals, there's going to be multiple possessions where you get a deflection, you force a bobble in the lane, and all of a sudden you go from a nice look to a scramble with 2 seconds left on the shot clock and effectively in the possession, even if it's not a genuine turnover. So I feel really confident about this series, really confident about the Thunder.
Yeah, you're going to have a good chance to defend whether you get the turnovers or not, just given sort of the Thunder DNA with a lot of these guys. Like you mentioned, length, athleticism, size. You've got basketball IQ, just intelligence, and then discipline. Like, if you line up those 5 things, like, you're going to be a very good defensive team, basically whoever you play.
Couple more. One, predict SGA's stat line, his first game as a number 1 option in the playoffs.
I'll go with 36 points, 7 assists, and 6 rebounds. Is that what you're looking for roughly?
That's exactly it. I'm going to go 40 points, 40-piece McNugget, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, 3 blocks. 3 blocks. Why not? Let's have some fun with SGA, a very efficient scorer. I think that he's going to perform exceptionally well in this setting. I think that J-Dub will as well. Who's going to be the biggest X factor for both teams in game number 1? If they get a huge night from this guy, they will win the game.
I don't know if they'll win the game, but I think that you mentioned Trey Murphy. I think that he's going to be a really big factor in this, just as a long, lanky shooter who can defend a little bit. And then I'm going to go with a shooter on the other end too, and Isaiah Joe, where if he's hitting and he can be the 5th man in that lineup, whether Josh is playing well or not, I just don't really know how you guard this team. If Isaiah Joe is hot, I think it's just sort of curtains tonight.
Yeah, I think that with the Pelicans, I've been deathly afraid of Trey Murphy all week. I will, for the sake of having another name, if Herb Jones is like locked in and he's the X factor in terms of he is just blowing things up defensively and making life hard on Shai, as he did to start the last Pelicans game in New Orleans, only he does that for a sustained 48 minutes without fouling and doesn't have to spend any time on the bench due to fouls. And then on the other end, he's knocking down threes and he's getting a few cutback doors and is finishing at the rim. If he's able to do that with what you imagine Brandon Ingram will be able to do, what you imagine Trey Murphy can chip in a few points, then things get really, really, really tight. But I just think that game 1 is heavily in favor of the Thunder from an aspect of play on the court, from an aspect of the crowd and the overwhelmingness I think that this arena will be tonight. So I've been saying for 2 weeks that the Thunder will win game 1, and then you kind of assess the series after that. But for the Thunder's X factor, I'm going to go with Lou Dort. I think that if Lou Dort can balance being amped up, wanting to make a huge impact with remaining efficient, selecting his spots on when to shoot and knocking down those open threes that come just from the gravity of Shai, from the gravity of J-Dub, we know what he can do defensively, getting up under Brandon Ingram and possibly flustering him a little bit as he's done before. I think that if he's able to be on both ends, the Pelicans just have no shot. And it could get ugly in this game if he can hit threes and frustrate Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, I thought Mark had a good point about Lou the other day where he was talking about why he succeeds so much in these elimination games in the playoffs. And he's right. He just steps up to the occasion and he sort of locks in and tightens all the bolts in his game. There are some guys, when those pressure moments come in, it just crushes them. And then for other guys, it elevates them. And it seems like Lou is that type of guy. So I think that there is going to be a level of them being too amped to start. I think they'll calm down eventually throughout this game. But for whatever reason, I've been super concerned about his like shooting and shot selection over the last few years, but going into the playoffs this year, I just don't feel that as much.
Yeah, I think that with Lou Dort, it's part of what Marcus said. He's a guy that if you can get away with it, he's going to go do it, but he understands when it's time to buckle down. And the messaging that I had last year down the stretch of the season, where people really were annoyed, so to say, by Lou Dort's shot selection, was that last year, the big conversation from J-Dub was like, he's not aggressive enough. And, Josh Giddey and these other guys are not aggressive enough. Well, if nobody's going to be aggressive, Lou Dort's going to be aggressive. And I think that this year, the biggest key for him has been you've put guys around him now, because Chet from day one has been as aggressive as you can really have a center be. J-Dub has taken a massive leap in terms of aggression and shot attempts. And then you know what SGA is. And he's really been, comfortable taking a backseat to that. And just by the simple nature of not having to be aggressive option number 2, he's improved his efficiency because it's eliminated some of those bad shots. So I believe that that's real. I still believe that the Josh Giddey stretch is real from March 1st. I think that, because you've only seen really like 2 3-pointer outlier games. Like, yes, he was fantastic from 3 in Milwaukee. He was fantastic from 3 in New Orleans, but that's not how he's done the majority of this production since March 1st. It's been at the rim. It's been in the mid-range. It's been sustainable ways with his body that I think that will help the Thunder in this game, help the Thunder this postseason. And I don't want to become a homer. I've made my prediction for the Thunder to go to the Western Conference Finals, but I think that if you see Josh Giddey playing well, this Thunder team is exceptionally hard to beat.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that the Pelicans are really going to double down on making him shoot. I think that if he's cold, obviously the Thunder can just sort of pivot somebody else. But I think the game plan for them is to make him, Josh, take 9+ threes tonight. Just really let it rain and you just sort of live with it and sort of pack the paint. And if Josh is punishing him, I'm right there with you. They're super, super tough to beat because of the added stuff he brings to their offense, playmaking and some extra rebounding. But yeah, it really comes down to the shooting.
Yeah, I think that with Josh Giddey, you're going to have to look at this postseason as context included in all. Like, you cannot be overreactionary to it, because I go back to that game against Dallas, both the extremely negative game against Dallas where they got blown up by 30 points, and the game that they won on TNT, specifically the one that they won on TNT in the Paycom Center. Josh Giddey played really well in the first half. Like, he played a good game, but he still got benched immediately entering the third quarter because Jason Kidd decided, hey, the only counter to this is just blatantly ignoring him, putting Gafford in the restricted area and not even going out to Josh Giddey. That's the only counter you can have to that Thunder group. And it's not an indictment on Josh Giddey at all. He played well that game. He just couldn't stay on the floor because it's unfair to him to make him a corner-sitting three-point shooter. And when you do that, that's when the Thunder have to adjust. And here's where the Thunder are still a 57-win team and one of the best teams in the NBA. When you adjust, you're putting in the likes of Isaiah Joe, Cason Wallace, Aaron Wiggins. Like, you're putting in those guys. And so I think that the reason why you feel confident in the Thunder is even if they play Josh Giddey off the floor, you're rolling with the guys who I think will step up and have big nights. And whenever you look at this Thunder rotation, I know people overlook depth in the playoffs, but are you telling me that there are not 4 out of 7 nights where one of Joe, Wiggins, and Kenrich and Gordon Hayward and Jay Will, whoever off the bench, is going to have an absolutely incredible night to couple with your 3 stars and guys who have played well in big moments? I find that hard to believe that you're just going to get shut out in that aspect of bench production. So I think that will lean Thunder as well. You saw it all yesterday. Like, the teams that didn't get a ton of bench spark were not very successful. So it's very, very encouraging for the Thunder at this point.
Yeah, with Josh, and you can correct me if it sounds like I'm sort of being negative about it. It's a good problem to have, but the Thunder don't necessarily need him to produce every game. Like, you need your core 3 of your stars of Dub, Shai, and Chet. You can't really supplement what they do if they're off. But with Josh, you don't need him to just be killing it, playing A+ every single night when you have those other options. Like, this is why depth is so important. You're seeing it with the top heavy teams. the Suns and whoever, where it's like if Grayson Allen just doesn't have it for that night, they're just kind of screwed. But the Thunder are in a very nice position where they have options.
Yeah, they certainly have options, and that's certainly fair. And I think that it can be both, where Josh can play well, but also can't close games or can't be on the floor in the second half, just as that Dallas game happened. So that's why I wanted to preface this before we go into game one with like, if he gets played off the floor, don't immediately assume it's because of bad play and because of how he played in November. I think that there's a shot that it can be a good and a bad thing, because at that point, how else do you counter this Thunder team? Like, what else can you do than just try to ignore Josh Giddey? Because you're not going to ignore, you're not going to ignore SGA. You're not going to ignore J-Dub. You're not going to ignore Chet. Lou Dort shooting 40% from three this year. Like, what are you going to do? Someone has to get game plan for, and so it can be both things, where he can play well and also not be able to play down the stretch. But Michael, I need your series prediction officially. Number one, your series prediction, but most importantly, of course, your prediction for this specific game.
The Thunder win this one. I saw the line was like 8.5. I think the Thunder get it to like 10 or something like that. I think that they really run away with this one. I think the Pelicans are just sort of gassed playing in all these playing games, not just physically, but mentally spent. So I have the Thunder winning tonight, and I have the Thunder winning in 5.
Thunder in 5. That is my exact prediction as well. We're going to be in New Orleans, in NOLA at the end of the week. That will be a lot of fun. Michael, you've been great. This makes pod number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 this week. You've been a part of 2 of them. I really appreciate that. Let them know where they can find you and all the stuff you're working on, what's coming out pretty soon. Anything you want to drop?
Well, you have accomplished a week that is hard to compete with. This is sort of like Russell Westbrook averaging a triple-double for a year. But what do I have to plug? Let's Talk Thunder Pod. I'm plugging those out Tuesdays and Fridays, and then I'm trying to get out another Chet video about his rookie season, and I'm going to try to get that out by Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on how much time we have after this game tonight. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. I'm doing a giveaway there for an Aaron Wiggins meme poster that got signed of him saving basketball. But I appreciate your time and have me on.
Thank you, Michael. Pod number 9 in the books. Check out pod number 10 of the week on Locked On NBA, where we recap the game number 1, and you'll get pod number 11 and 12 after this game as well. So until tomorrow, until tonight, be good and be good to one.